Uh, the two other celebrations I want to talk about today, St. Joseph's Day, March 19, 1958. Well, it's 65 years ago that Merton had his street corner experience, which was a really turning point for him. He didn't know he'd only have 10 years more to live, but he did make the most of it. Some of his best writing was done uh, in those last 10 years, though none of it was published. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So I want to read from his book, only published after his death, actually. But this is that moment, and it plays into the other celebration we're talking about. Uh, he said in Louisville, he was doing what all Trappists do when they get a doctor's appointment in Louisville. They'll spend the whole day in Louisville, and he was going to head out to a friend's house where he played with their kids and drank bourbon, and they brought him back after midnight. That's one of the Trappist rules, that if you're somehow traveling and you come in after midnight, you don't have to show up for the 3:15 chanting. So all monks try to return after midnight. In Louisville, at the corner of Fourth and Walnut, he had just come out of his doctor's office, and he was going to walk to Tommy O'Callahan's house, that was his friend, and then hang out all day. In Louisville, at the corner of Fourth and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people, that they were mine and I theirs, that they could not be alien to one another, even though they were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, a spurious self isolation. The whole illusion of a separate, holy existence is a dream. And if only everybody could realize this, but it cannot be explained. There is no way of telling people that they're all walking around shining like the sun. He said, I have no program for this seeing. It's only given, but the gate of heaven is everywhere, even on the corner in the middle of the shopping district. He says, only everybody could realize this. What? That this whole idea that we're walking around and then everybody else is out there, and which can make you feel quite lonely. And he said, these people, they're all shining like the sun. He said, if only everybody could realize this, have this kind of realization, but it cannot be explained. There's no way of telling people they're all walking around shining like the sun. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, so 65 years ago, today. Yeah, so we want to celebrate that Merton could experience that and write about it so that we could all actually contemplate that. It's not possibly be strangers. People just show up here all the time out of the blue. No one knows them, including me. And then sometimes they stay, and then they become part of this community. That's the that's the second celebration for today. Is um, tomorrow officially is a 3-year anniversary for the beginning of lockdown for COVID. It was March 20th, 2020. Tomorrow's March 20th, 2023. And soon after that, uh, we, we were born. Heart to Heart was born. And I've been meditating on that for a couple of weeks now, just on 3 years of being with most of you, some of you a little more recent. Did you hear the bell today? Did you hear the bell? Could you hear the bell ring? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
That's thanks to a recent friend, Marianne Holtz from Florida, who just communicated to me. She says, I don't hear the bell. I don't hear the bell. And she said, and she even sent me instructions how to go into the program, because there's a kind of thing in the Zoom program that can turn out any exterior sound, like other people talking in the background. Well, somehow it got tripped and was turning out the bell. So the reason you have the bell here Said somebody chipped in here. They said, yeah, where's the bell? It seemed a little weird. So thanks for that, Marianne. I really appreciate it. But this group, I've been meditating on the experience of being with you for 3 years, and I got a couple of poems out of it, and I'm going to do one today and tease out a few things for our teaching, and then I'll do one next Sunday because it's not done yet. It's a more difficult poem. This one I got done in a week. So here it goes. Let's do the poem, and then we'll just sort of contemplate it a little bit. Find it. Yeah, and this is sort of just trying to really, if you ever have to try to tell people what a retreat was like, or even what we do on Sundays, it's not that easy. Not that easy. So I was writing this one is probably to give people a picture of that. And who knows, there could be somebody absolutely first time here. It happens all the time. So this will give you a kind of picture, at least in 3 years, what I see. Next week, part 2 on this. Our virtual heart-to-heart contemplative community aspires to go beyond belief, and instead we focus on practicing 3 types of dancing. We began our Sunday circle dance by listening deeply to a teaching. Then we take that teaching into the dance of silent meditation. And our third dance, finally, is the dance of communion. In our communion dance, we allow members of our community to sing freely about what they privately celebrate, suffer, or wonder. And each of us listens deeply to these songs, even when we don't understand them, especially when we don't understand or agree with them. And that's the most precious gift that we can give to one another. Deep listening is how we water the seeds in another's heart and in our own, and how we awaken the song of everlasting healing in our beloved communities and in the Sacred Heart of this suffering world. And our virtual heart-to-heart contemplative community aspires to go beyond belief, and instead we focus on practicing 3 types of dancing. One thing that comes clear is that this is a contemplative community. It doesn't mean we're monks, but it does mean the heart of contemplation and being a contemplative community is that we're trying to grow a deeper relationship with the sacred. One of the things that Merton and Thich Nhat Hanh talked about in 62, and Merton was talking about this, and he wrote 10,000 letters, most of them in the 60s, and he was writing to people, and one of the common themes of his letters was just the sadness of how modern, that was 65 years ago, but it was the sadness of how modern culture, American, but world too, was losing a relationship with the sacred. Watch 100 random programs on cable. How many of them will have any mention of the sacred or even the possibility of the sacred? I think you'd be really shocked. You could go 0 for 100. It wouldn't be that hard. So that's primarily what, when I tell people, what do you do on Sunday? I said, well, we spend some time trying to deepen our relationship with the sacred. That's, can't always give them a poem like this. I don't even have this poem in my heart yet. It came out of it, but I don't have it to where I could just recite it. But I say, for people coming for one reason or another from all different faith religions that we grew up in, or none. And, but somehow what holds people here, I think, is just somehow to to have a deeper relationship with what matters. The sacred is the same as just what really matters. Uh, my niece Lisa was here, who was her older brother died at 30 in the beginning of the AIDS thing, and he just came to grips in those last few years because he was a guy who lived the high life, and he said none of that mattered to him anymore. He was just interested in what was next, what really matters, you know. And I said, we aspire to go beyond belief because there's really not a belief system because, Buddhism is really not about belief. It's really, Jesus was, Christianity started out as a practice, or have no belief, no problem. It's no problem. But we're sort of all united by a practice. We do these different dances, our intensive things called dancing with spirit. They're the dance. Yeah. So, we start out by one of the threads of the three types of dancing. If you're going to pull a thread out of it, it's we start our Sunday circle dance by listening deeply to a teaching. That would be the thread in all three. It's listening deeply to some words rolling out here now. And then when you go, we segue into sitting in the silence. What is the silence good for? Well, a number of things, but one thing is you could hear something at a deeper level when there's not so much background noise. We all have a cable TV set up in our heads. And so there's a lot of messages that keep pulling us up to the surface of life with that thing that I'm calling in the latest teaching just that horizontal level. Matters of time and space. Some are important, those ones that's what the ego's for, to manage those, important activities in the realm of time and space. But then that vertical realm of eternity, infinite and eternal things, that's also a realm. That's the realm that sort of has disappeared. Ken Wilber, when he talks about modern life, he says because of the flatland, no depth. See, plants all need a certain amount of depth to grow and flower, and it's shallowing up. All we can talk about is money and fame or whatever. Yeah, so this idea that we spend some time, and that's what you're doing in contemplation or meditation. You're leaving the surface of things and trying to go deeper. And listening is the code word here. Listening deeply. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it in his tradition. Listening with the ear of the heart, first line of Merton's tradition. What are you listening for? Guidance, the truth. It's in there. Yeah, and so a lot of what you learn over the years in terms of doing this, whether you're doing Vipassana meditation, mindfulness, centering prayer, doesn't matter. You'll find your flavor of what works for you, that you can actually listen and get some guidance. I sat this morning with Lisa in here in the dark, and she's a very stressed out nurse and big organization, trying to keep her father from dying in the last couple of months, and listening in the silence for guidance, what to do with things. Yeah, important matters. So listening deeply. And we do that in the meditation. And then we come into the third section. It's easy to talk about, well, there's the teaching and then there's meditation. People sort of understand that maybe. But what we do in this third session, it's not really not a chat. It's not even, it is a kind of deep conversation, but it has a different kind of flow. I call it the communion dance. Merton, one of the last things, he gave a talk and he said, brothers and sisters, he said, the deepest level of communication is not communication, it's communion. And that's what he saw in that street corner. We're all connected. And to know that, and then to actually, what deepens the connection in a community is for people to just speak from the heart. And, so I say, communion dance, we allow members of the community to sing freely about what they are privately, in their own heart of hearts. They're maybe can celebrate something, they're suffering something, or they're just wondering about something. That's sort of that sort of picks up what people are talking about. Sometimes people say, I really don't know where I'm going with this, but there's something in them that says they want to find something, and they use this opportunity and the group's support to find it. Sometimes it takes a little while, and sometimes people can come out with it. But so to what we're suffering, what we're celebrating, what we're wondering about, that's actually enriches the community. And some of you who don't um, speak very much, your listening is the other half of that because it's what brings it out. That's why I say each of us listens deeply to these songs. At least that's what we aspire to, uh, even when we don't understand them. That's for me, true for me, it's true for everybody. Sometimes you just don't get the gist of what they're saying. But even when we don't understand them, we keep listening, especially when we don't understand or agree with them, especially when somebody says something and it trips a switch in us. We don't agree with that. That happens for me too. Yeah. But then the aspiration is to just keep the ear of your heart open to them. It's, I'm working with judgment this year. Judgment slams the door on that, doesn't it? They're wrong. And, you know, that's, that's really a great practice to when, somebody trips your switch, but then you just say, okay, take a breath, you go back and you listen to them just as an aspiration that this is the place where people can speak and be listened to. Yeah. How many places are there like that? So deep listening is how we water the seeds of soul in another's heart. Thich Nhat Hanh often talks about that, watering the seeds in your own heart and in other people's hearts by listening to them. Yeah. And it's how we awaken the song of real healing, everlasting healing. It heals people to be listened to, even if you don't agree with them. There's some healing that happens there. And we can bring that, this is a certain kind of community, but you're in a family, maybe you're in a work setting, whatever. So we all go from communities to communities, various communities, and this practice of deep listening, it, 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 it it's a healing factor in all those communities. Doesn't mean you don't respond in a certain situation when it's called for. It doesn't mean you don't just have a discriminating kind of awareness to where you say, well, I'm hearing you. I don't, this is not the place to do that. Where it's pure listening here. That's why we don't do crosstalk. We say, well, I think it should be like this. It's not like that kind of discussion. You know that. But just the listening. It can heal communities. And, the world, if you watch news and see the news of the world, there's people in the streets in almost every country. France, they're just changing the ball game there. 62 was retirement age, now it's 64, and none of the people want it, but they're doing it, and so the people are out in the streets. People are out in the streets in Jerusalem, Jews protesting because they're. And so people are trying to be listened to by their governments all over the world. Listening is what's needed. So that's really the dance practice here. To teaching, to your own inner guide. You all have an inner teacher in there. It doesn't matter if you call it the Tao or the Holy Spirit or whatever. You all have some wisdom in there. We go into silence to connect with that. And then we come out of the silence and we can share with one another what we're suffering about at the moment, what we can celebrate in the day or in your life, what's going on. It was just great to have my sister and neither of them thought they'd ever be back here again, and so here we were for the weekend. That was a big celebration, or just sometimes the whole first two dances just bring you out wondering about something. We don't, wonder is an interesting, uh, what, endangered species. Haven't you ever wondered what a happy country would be like? We're the richest country in the world, and we're maybe one of the unhappiest. You look at the kids. Look at your own families, and uh, we have a lot, and that is okay. I I say a prayer to Thomas Crapper every morning when I have a flush toilet. Half of the world doesn't even have one. So this material is great. It's a great benefit, but how happy are we? And one of a Tibetan Buddhist that Debbie Mahoney put me on to, Norman Fisher. He has a book. He says the world could be otherwise. Well, gee, I wonder how. So that idea of the imagination comes in sometimes as part of the dance. Is a big part to can you even wonder, can you even imagine what it would be like to have a country where everyone had health care, where no one had to starve? Can you even imagine that? How could the world could be otherwise? And so that's part of the what's inside too. And you know if you lose that ability to imagine some kind of different life for yourself, for your family, for the United States, for the world, can we imagine a world without nuclear weapons that could end it? I mean, that's John Lennon's signature song. If we don't imagine it, I mean, take your pick. You know, remote control. Somebody had to imagine this before it. And you look around your room now, where you are. There's not. I really say try to find one thing that wasn't imagined first before it was created. I'm talking about the creative things. I can look around and see dust bunnies here. Well, that wasn't my doing, but something created dust bunnies. I don't know what it was, but if we lose the ability to imagine, so when we the third dance is we talk about what's breaking our hearts right now. We talk about how the heartbreak brought us into something fuller. Sometimes that's what we're celebrating, how we just got through something. And then, but also we celebrate, our imagination and wonder. Yeah, those are but all of it comes from the heart and we give it to everybody else. And that's a very generous thing to do in the third part. So these three dances, yeah. So this is the first one. So I think this is enough on the teaching, and we can get ready to go into the silence here of contemplation.